you know, what was really interesting was you all gave very disparate points of view. It was quite fascinating to learn the overall macroeconomic view of the global economy. You speak from the company point of view, obviously, with your products. And of course, that was a really fascinating topic as well. I particularly like the anecdote about the call center couple. But I think what I'll do is I'll go straight to the questions, which is the question that I was really interested in. And it was interesting because it doesn't seem to be what you all three said. You said, we heard David talk about the trade within Asia rising enormously. You talked about the call center couple, their need for products, and you talked about going out to the Chinese consumer, tweaking your formulation of the Oreo cookie specifically to cater to them. But yet there's this question here that still says, well, Asia's dependent on the US and Europe. And when will that stop?
I think the dependence on US, I don't think it's a question of dependence. I think it's more like US now depending more in Asia than any other place for its strategic future. So if you take the Fortune 500 or S&P 500 multinationals companies out of the US, all of them are now investing massively in China. From Coca-Cola, and I can give an anecdote quickly, Roberto Goizueta, who was the CEO of Coca-Cola, was asked the question, as America is aging, where do you see the growth for Coca-Cola? And his answer was China. People said, you are consuming only 3 bottles per, I mean, the consumption, the highest consumption of Coca-Cola is in Mexico at 400 bottles per capita. And he said, if we can make Mexico drink 400 bottles per capita, China is a breeze. From 3 bottles per capita to 100, if they can create that consumption, actually, in fact, the growth for 21st century for Coca-Cola will be greater than last century. So last century was the US market. Now it is the Asia, primarily China and India market. I think that's kind of a bet most American large corporations are doing, including Pradeep's company, for example. That's where I see the future. I think the foreign direct investment into Asia, and we did not talk about Indonesia, where I'm working right now. Indonesia is about to become the 4th largest economy. Power has already shifted, in my view. David, I don't know.
I guess my simple answer was that very first chart that I put up was an attempt to say that this dependence on the US is effectively, it's all over already. I mean, that was kind of the point, was to say, look, we've had 0 growth in the US for 4 years. We've had negative growth in Europe for the past 4 years. We've had negative growth in Japan for the past 4 years, or 4.5 or 5 years now. And Asia has continued to grow almost at an average sort of growth rate. So that's the kind of thing. I think that was the point, was to say that it's already over. And the second chart was to say it didn't happen overnight. This has been a grinding, slow process for the last 30, 40 years, where Asia grows fast. I mean, 40 years ago, it grew really fast, but it couldn't drive any growth because it was too small to matter. But it's, the magic of compound growth. You put $1 in the bank today, and after 50 years, it's worth something. It's that grinding year after year growth where Asia gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And today, it's almost as big as the U.S. The Asia 10 is 95% as big as the U.S. is today, this year. And that allows it to generate the demand which is capable of driving its own growth. Think about this. If the US and the Asia 10 were the same size, they almost are today, think about how many dollars worth of new demand you're putting out there every year. If the US grows in a normal year, I mean, in the good old days, it would grow at a 3% sort of growth rate. Someday we'll get back there. We're at 2% today. But in a normal year, if the US is pretend it's $100 big, in a normal year, it grows at a 3% growth rate. It puts out $3 of new demand in a normal year. If Asia is par for par, 1 for 1 with the US, but it's growing at a 7% sort of growth rate, it's putting out, $2.25. For every $1 of new demand the U.S. is putting on the global stage every year, Asia is now putting out more than $2, okay? And it's those dollars of new demand which are the very definition of growth in the world, right? And Asia is putting out twice as much now as the U.S. is.
I'll just amplify the point that these two gentlemen were making. And you heard me tell you that a quarter of our growth dollars are already coming out of India and China. When you look at the fact that three big drivers that haven't been exploited at all yet, which is the penetration of a lot of products, the per capita consumption of a lot of products, and the premiumization of categories. And these three factors will continue to drive the growth of categories in these markets for a long, long time to come. And that's not going to stop. The balance, I believe, has already tilted and is going to tilt even more.
Can I just add one thing? One of the things why India's story is better than we think, I generally talked about two markets. First of all, large Indian enterprises will go global in the upstreaming basic industries. Like in the 80s, US will exit them permanently. They exited the television, the watch industry, steel industry even for that matter, to do something bigger, better. It's a typical US journey, and they're going through that one. And the biggest acquirer will be the Indian enterprises, not as many Chinese, although we believe Chinese. So Indian enterprises will globalize through acquisitions as opposed to just exports. But the second most important element happening suddenly is that India will become a second sourcing destination for US market. Western markets in general, but US particularly, because the bilateral alignment where if you have to import, India's growth comes from four major industries. The consumer markets we talked about, defense is a major, major growth industry in India. As it gets privatized, like the cellular telephone, is going to massively grow. So defense capabilities is much more importation. You need to export to counterbalance. So India will be blessed as a nation to as a second sourcing. So the dependence on China for all kinds of products, agricultural products surprisingly, not just commodities, agricultural, but high-valued fruits and vegetables, flowers, to automotive components, to textiles. It just goes on across the board by and large. So America will be one of the biggest buyers of Indian products going forward is what we see in the alignment that's taking place. So there are other growth engines built into the Indian economy that we have not still talked about. Most of that again is that you need a couple of ports for logistics and all this stuff is primarily, but it's coming along far more so. I'm not as pessimistic on India as what you might have heard from other people in the process. Just wanted to make that comment.
So it just goes to show that obviously that question perhaps has the wrong end of the stick, because as you all have proven, it's Asian demand. Asia doesn't need to rely on the US and Europe anymore. It's just a perception that's still out there.
I will hold on my view. We have created the institute called India-China-America Institute, originally as a policy think tank. Originally we wanted to call China-India-America, but the acronym is a CIA Institute, which is the brand we did not want to have. I did not want America in the front, so we created ICA Institute, which actually articulates that the trilateral play will be very important in trade and investment, which means Chinese will be allowed, whether we like it or not, massive investment in America. We went through this cycle in America in the 80s where we were so anti-Japanese over the board, but Japanese bought out a bunch of things. Next buyers will be Chinese. American assets will be sold to the Chinese enterprises as they will be sold to the Indian. There will be a lot more FDI as well as trade between these three blocks. It's inevitable, in my view. I think we have to look at this new trilateral as opposed to the bilateral understanding that we have been doing it so far.
All right. Any last thoughts? Because I thought perhaps I will wrap it up there. We are running quite behind. We do stand between you and lunch. So I think I will at that point, any last thoughts at all about this topic? It's a very big topic. It's an engaging topic, but unfortunately we seem to have run out of time to really address it. So at this stage, I would love to thank the panel. Fantastic speakers there. Big round of applause for them. And of course, as with all our panelists today, we'd like to present you with some of those lovely gifts from Protsahan. And at this stage, I'd like to invite Mr. Suresh V to come on stage to give you all these gifts. Thank you. Yes. Yes, hello. Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting one. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. I wasn't meant to be on the panel. Thank you, by the way. Mr. Suresh, would you like to take a photo? Yes. Oh, can we all? Yes. Great. Thank you. Oh, I'll carry it too, shall I? Thank you. A wonderful panel indeed. But we're not quite done yet. Thank you, speakers. You can all, I believe some of you have got a bus or a shuttle to catch. But the rest of us, of course, we are going to have lunch very soon. But before lunch, we are still in for a treat. I should